Okay, so hello, my name is Jaroslaw Janas and my student ID is shown on the screen. And this is a short demonstration showcasing how the Lynis application works and can be used to further secure your Linux-based system. So what Lynis is, it's an auditing tool that allows you to run predefined tests in your Linux environment, and those tests will pick up any potentially unsafe settings or misconfigurations in your system that can leave any open doors for an attacker to go through. So Lynis can be installed from apt using this command, and it's available on all Linux systems. And additionally, it can be downloaded from this repository. So I actually already have it cloned in my home directory here under Lynis. So if we open that, we can look at the files, and we can see this bash file, I think it is, that allows us to run Lynis. So let's actually run that. And now we can see all the different options that we can run Lynis with. So the main option I'll be focusing on is the audit system option. There are some additional flags, such as specifying a custom profile, or having additional debug information, or running without any output. But these aren't really relevant to this specific demo, and they're not really necessary to run any audits. But it's worth mentioning that additional configuration is possible, and that you can adapt your specific you can adapt Lynis to your specific problems or issues, or your specific server setup. So let's run an audit. So I'll just copy this and let's run our audit. So we can see that we're running in non-privileged scan mode, and what that means is some of the tests need root access to certain areas of the system, and they won't be able to run because we're running this audit as a user. So we can see there are different areas of the system that we're running tests in, such as time and synchronization. So if I just grab this slider here and scroll up, we can see that we have last time synchronization 600 seconds ago. We have an NTP daemon or client running. So if we didn't have those, or if these settings were unsafe, they would either appear yellow or red. There is various areas here that we're testing. We're testing SSH support, any web servers, and a lot of boot and services. So at the very bottom, actually here at the bottom, we get our warnings and suggestions. And warnings are more serious kind of issues that you should deal with, while suggestions are simply suggestions. They do improve the overall security of your system. Some of them are actually eye-opening. Actually, when I read through some of these, I was quite shocked on how I never thought about fixing this, or changing that, or configuring something differently. So it goes to show that the weakest link, the weakest door an attacker can go through is the human door. It's always the human factor that's the weak point. So let's actually go all the way to the bottom. We can see we got a hardening index of 62, which is not bad. This is Ubuntu. I think Kali Linux has a score of 56, if I remember correctly from testing it. And we get some additional statuses, such as if firewall is enabled, or if we have a malware scanner. And then we can see the tests that we weren't able to run because we run this as a user and not as a root. And some information on where this report is saved. So let's run this as a root this time around. I want to get this warning saying that we're running user files with root permissions, which could potentially be unsaved because those user files could have been modified by the user, and we're essentially giving them the root permission. So if you have more than one user in a system, you should probably want to change the permission on these files and follow the steps outlined here to resolve this issue. But since I'm the only user on this server, I'll simply ignore it and just press enter. Okay, so now that Lynis is done, let's go through some of the things it showed us. So back to these warnings and suggestions. As you can see, under each of these we have those links that actually if we copy any of these, let's copy a warning. If we copy this warning and open it here, we can see a more detailed description of why we need to change this particular issue. We get some guidance on how we might be able to resolve this, though it's worth mentioning that this information isn't always 100% reliable. It is still good to have this additional knowledge and more in-depth kind of explanation of these issues. So this particular issue is on IP tables, and where we have IP tables enabled but no rules active, so which kind of makes sense, because if someone changes these IP tables, they could reroute some request or ports to a completely different server, which is unsafe. And then additional thing I'll actually look at and fix here is the SSH configuration. So we can see some of these SSH settings. So these are suggestions, which means they're only suggested to be fixed. And actually what I really want to focus here on is we're being told to change our SSH port from 22 to space. And I don't exactly know what space is. So I had a quick look on their website, and this is a good example that showcases that this information isn't always 100% self-explanatory. But after some more research, it turns out there's actually no real reason to have SSH set to 22. It's a default port that's used by every single server with SSH out there. And knowing that your SSH on a certain port makes the life of an attacker so much easier, because all they have to do is go through all the IPs and every time just access port 22 and look for any weaknesses, see if certain usernames or passwords might work. So yes, this is something pretty obvious that I never really thought about before, and it goes to show that the weakest security factor in computer security is the human factor. And this is something that actually I was quite shocked by, because this is something very obvious that I should have thought about ages before. And this is why Lynis is great. I don't really have to think about it. It tells me that this is bad. You should perhaps change this. So let's fix some of these. So let's start with IP tables. So let's remove IP tables. Remove IP tables. And then the next thing is we want to fix the SSH configuration. So I actually have them the settings here already. So we need to access the SSH configuration, and we can simply paste this in. And the beauty is, I think I'm not editing this as a sudo user actually. So the really beautiful thing is that the user doesn't really have to know the exact details on how all of this works. That's what Lynis is for. Lynis looks for settings. My point being, you don't have to be an expert in order to improve security of your system, because you're specifically being told which settings you should potentially change. And then if you have some kind of a server or a project running on your Linux system, and you're worried that changing some setting could impact the performance of your project or it could break it, then you can do additional research, or you can refer to these explanations here. But you don't need to be a Linux expert. You don't need to know the super inner workings of Linux in order to fix all of the issues that Lynis showcases. So let's actually save these and reboot our system. Okay, so now that we have rebooted our system, let's see if our issues were resolved. So let's go to Lynis again and run it with sudo permissions. Okay, so we can see that our hardening index went up by 11%, so we're at 73 now, and that's quite an improvement here. Though we're still missing a malware scanner, so that's something I wanted to install, and we're actually being told right here that we should install a malware scanner. Well, too late now, I guess. So we can see that our warnings were all resolved, so we have no immediate threats or high-level threats, though there is still a lot of suggestions left, but no SSH that I see. Oh, there's per root access. Yes, there's only one left. I didn't change it for because it would impact my ability to work on the server. But another thing I want to mention here is what we're effectively doing is we're trading ease of use for security. So we're giving up some of the functionality that we get by default for a more secure system. So yes, we've changed the port, and now we have to remember that our port is not 22 but 20,002, and we can only access our server from 2 SSH sessions. But we improve the security of the system this way. So it's a trade. Okay, so now that I've went through most of auditing, the next thing I want to show is custom tests. So a user can create their own tests for their specific problems, and that's another great thing about Lynis is you can adapt it in whatever way you want to your specific problem. It's more like an environment than a piece of software in itself. And so if we go to this include folder, we can see a template for tests. Let's open that template. And we can see we have some documentation and some already predefined simple tests. So in order to activate this, we just simply copy this. We copy this to tests _custom. And now if we run our audit, we will see our custom tests. Okay, so let's have a look, and we can see that our custom tests actually run. Some of them actually returned warnings. I think it's most likely to misconfiguration in the test. So some paths were not found because we didn't change anything. We use a predefined format, but this is just a proof to showcase that a user can create their own test, and they can write a specific test addressing some security issue or worry that they might have. So another thing that Lynis allows us to do is actually we can audit Docker files. So if we run Lynis again, we can see this audit Docker file, option. So let's actually do that. So I already have a Docker image here somewhere. So we'll just create a new one. And now we can go into Lynis and actually run it and see if it works. So the command is audit Docker file and then the path. And we can see that our Dockerfile test actually run, and our hardening index is very bad because this is a fairly simple Dockerfile. It's just once again a proof to show that it works, and we got a very bad score and quite a few warnings, and I believe some tests weren't able to run because of these warnings, because of simplicity of this Dockerfile. So yes, since Docker is becoming more mainstream nowadays and more companies are shifting to Docker and they're Dockerizing their projects, their software, you can audit those as well and improve their security too, which is actually pretty great. So the last thing I want to show is that we actually can set up profiles for our Lynis. So we can see we have a bunch of settings here, and one of these settings is, for example, quick, which means that if our some of the tests, they might require user input, such as, for example, pressing a space or just pressing any key to proceed. So this will simply ignore that and proceed through the test. We can add additional pause. We can enable some plugins and disable others, such as firewall or Docker, DNS. So we can have machine-specific profiles. So in a scenario when there is a big company and there's many machines, and we have a central database of tests, and those tests are synchronized throughout all of the machines. So for example, every 2 hours, all machines they synchronize their local tests with the tests in the database, and then they run all of those tests periodically. So in a scenario when we have a specific machine where we need very specific configuration because it's different from all of our other machines, and we want to disable some of their tests or skip them or disable some of the component plugins, we can create a specific profile just for that machine to adapt it to our overall structure. So yes, Lynis can be scale up quite easily and can be also managed on a machine level, which is something that's very thoughtful of developers. Okay, so that's everything. Thank you for watching, and that's it.